Welcome to Fast Keto. I'm your host, Ketogenic Girl. Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Fast Keto. I am your host, Vanessa, the best-selling author of the book and cookbook on keto called Keto Essentials. I am also the creator of the 28-Day Ketogenic Girl Challenge, which you can find out more about at ketogenicgirl.com. And I am your host, the host of Fast Keto, and I just love talking about all things keto. I love having fantastic guests on the show, like our special guest today, Dr. John Limansky, the biohacking doctor. I always love having John as a regular guest on the show. He has been doing keto for over a decade himself. He loves to do biohacking, and he's not set in his ways when it comes to his keto approach. He's always learning and evolving things based on the latest science, which I am like very much myself. We have a lot in common and agree on a lot of the same concepts when it comes to keto. So it's always fascinating having John on the show. Today we talk about my high protein experiment, some of the results that I had doing the recent high protein protocol that I did, some of the results and experience that he did and he had when he did his 3-to-1 protein to fat experiment, his recent egg fast, several 5-day water fasts he's done. He's also going to be doing 21 days of carnivore, which I am so excited to see his experience and results on that. And today we dive deep into amino acids, the best sources of them, antioxidants, and how you need less of them on a keto diet. Do calories still matter if you're trying to burn fat? And what is the best combination between calories, creating a caloric deficit, and also utilizing time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting to burn fat, and much, much more. So I hope you enjoy today's episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. All right, guys, I am so excited to tell you about the brand new version of my free ebook, Keto Reset. I first released it in 2015. I spent the entire summer working on this to make a brand new updated version, and you can get your free copy by going to ketogenicgirl.com, click on free ebook, and you can sign up for my newsletter and you will receive your free copy of the book. It covers so many different topics, including finding your optimal protein range, how to use the different macronutrients to your benefit, a starter grocery list. It's such a great place to start, and a guide to quitting sugar. I added so many new sections and expanded it, and I'm really happy with the final result. I think you guys will get a ton out of it. And if you are not a beginner to keto, there's still a ton of great information in there that you'll find. It's also a great little book to send over to anyone that you know who might be interested in getting started on keto or just learning more about the science behind it and how to test for ketosis, and all of these different things are in the book. So I hope that you enjoy it. And if you sign up for my newsletter, just know I don't send out a ton of stuff, maybe once a month at the most. If there's something I've come across that's interesting, I don't send out a weekly newsletter. I don't really like getting emails all that often myself, but when I do find something interesting that I think that you will enjoy, sometimes I'll send out a new recipe that I've worked on for the blog, or just something, an article or study that I think you might find interesting. But for the most part, it's not a high volume newsletter. So you can know that if you receive something from me, it's something I think you'll really find valuable. So you can go to ketogenicgirl.com and click on free ebook, enter your name and email, and you'll get your free copy of my brand new ebook, Keto Reset. I recommend you check out my 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. What it is a full 28-day meal plan and program that includes all the recipes and foods that you need to eat for 28 days. I call it the 28-day challenge because it's just a great way to get past all the information overwhelm. There's so much information online about keto, and this way you can just get past that. All the macros are calculated for you to get into a state of ketosis, and I was able to do that by using tried and true proven macro approaches that I've developed over several years of doing the keto diet and working with over 3,000 people to date on this program. Our Ketogenic Girl community in the members group is incredible. Everyone in there is so supportive, providing helpful tips and hints and sharing their successes and struggles and challenges as well in the group together, because we're all in this together gaining more health. The 20-day challenge program comes with weekly shopping lists, meal plan overviews, a guide to testing yourself and interpreting the results for keto, and it also comes with my support and coaching in our members only group. So go check it out at ketogenicgirl.com. It's the 28-day challenge, and any purchase of the 20-day meal plans gets you access into the challenge. You can choose to get the program either soft copy or with a printed copy as well. It's printed on beautiful paper, spiral bound, and I ship it out to you the same day. So go check it out, the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge at ketogenicgirl.com. A few disclaimers. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice, as I am not a qualified healthcare provider. The information presented on this podcast is for educational purposes only. Ketogenic Girl is not qualified to provide medical advice. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to this podcast. Prior to beginning a ketogenic diet, you should undergo a full health screening with your physician to confirm that a keto diet is suitable for you and to rule out any conditions or contraindications that may pose risks or that are incompatible with a ketogenic diet. A keto diet may or may not be appropriate for you if you have any kind of health condition, whether known to you or unknown. So you must consult your physician to find this out. Anyone under the age of 18 should consult with their physician and their parents or legal guardian. Welcome, John. It's great to have you back on Fast Keto, joining us again here today, and this time from Puerto Rico.
Yeah, Vanessa, it's great to be here. Thanks again. It's always good to talk to you.
It's pretty amazing, actually. You sound really, really clear. When we first chatted about doing this while you were on the cruise, I didn't know how it was going to go with the Wi-Fi, but I guess you found a good hotspot there.
I hope so. We'll see as the talk goes on. I'm surrounded by pillows to drown out the noise, so I'll have to take a picture of the setup. It's definitely unique.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad to have you on the show today. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about protein and amino acids, and we're going to do an IG Live afterwards as well, talking about protein, and kind of want to get into high protein because you've had some experience with this and you did a high protein protocol, and I believe you did a protocol that was a 3-to-1 protein to fat, and you had some mixed results. I think you didn't really enjoy the experience, but you did gain a pound of lean body mass. Have you made more of an opinion on it or had more reflection on it since you did it, since it was a few months ago?
Yeah, so I did 7 days, basically 3-to-1 ratio. The only difference really though was mine was still more of a caloric deficit. So I was averaging about 1,400 calories. My normal TEE or, kind of total energy expenditure is about 4,500 calories because I'm super active. So, I was in a pretty significant calorie deficit, and I think that had a huge role to play in terms of how I felt. And in terms of the amount of protein, I was pushing about 200 grams of protein. My normal before that was about 80 grams. And I realized that I probably needed to increase it somewhat. And so I increased it about 20 grams on average. So the takeaway really for me was couple things. Number one, overall, I probably need to increase my protein a little bit. And I've noticed that putting on lean body mass is a little bit easier, which makes sense. In terms of changes in my glucose and ketone numbers, not so much. And then maybe next time I do it, if I ever do it again, it'll be not in a caloric deficit, because that definitely played a huge role in how I felt, I think.
Well, I think that's one of the challenges, and I'm sure you'll agree, is when you are eating mostly meat, that you get satiated so quickly. It's just very difficult to eat a lot of meat. 4,500 calories of meat would be, quite a lot to do at a 3-to-1 ratio unless you were really, bumping up the fat more. It would be difficult to hit that many calories. I know for me, when I was doing it, I was usually between 1,200 and 1,400 calories, but I couldn't eat more than that.
Just because you felt full?
Yeah, and I think that for me was interesting because one of the reasons I was doing it was to test, Dr. Ted Naiman's, some of his theories on, the protein leverage satiety, I think he calls it. And I did find that I was so satiated from eating that much that I just wasn't able to eat more than that in terms of meat. Like, it was just very difficult. If you wanted to give me, a big salad or carbs or ice cream or, keto ice cream or those kinds of things, I probably could have made room for it, but I just couldn't eat more protein or meat. And I think that showed me that there is something to that leverage, that protein leverage that he discusses.
Yeah, I definitely agree with him in that regards. I mean, I think argument you can make too is there's another person named Marty Kendall who talks about micronutrient density. And basically the theory is that because your cells, so if you get down to the cellular level, need micronutrients in order to make energy in the form of ATP, which is what we need to basically fuel all our systems. You need these micronutrients, and they're generally found in higher density qualities in higher protein foods, and also in terms of fatty foods, but not necessarily liquid fats. And so if you kind of look at the breakdown of what Ted Naiman talks about in terms of what's going to make you more satiated in terms of protein, and you overlap that with the micronutrient kind of density hypothesis, it really turns out to be the same thing. And that is whole, real foods, and mostly it's going to be protein based. And so my question really for Ted and Marty would be, is it really protein that's causing that satiety leverage hypothesis, or is it micronutrient density? And I don't know if we really know the answer to that, but that is something that I think is probably more esoterical than anything. And if it's making you full and feel good, then it's probably doing a good job for your body.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about a super fun giveaway contest that I'm doing from now until the end of September. You can enter by going to iTunes and leaving me a rating or review. You will enter to win a free copy of my Build Your Day meal plans. I'll ship them to you. They have over 200 delicious keto recipes, and you can custom build your own meal plan day by day by using the recipes and all the forms in there that I have. There are tons of resources in there and so many easy to make recipes. I also have a no-cook version of the plans, and you as the winner can choose which one you get, the regular Build Your Day or the no-cook Build Your Day. And these meal plans are an extension pack as a part of the 28-day challenge. They retail for $249, but if you are a member of the 28-day challenge, they're only $49, and I will ship you one for free if you are the winner of this contest. So to enter, you can go to iTunes and leave me a rating or review anytime between now and the end of September, and your rating or review will enter you into the contest with one entry. And you can go to Ketogenic Girl under contest giveaway and find all of the details and full contest rules there. It is open to anyone living in the US, Canada, UK, Australia, and parts of Europe as well. So go ahead and leave me a rating or review. Go to Ketogenic Girl under giveaway contest to find out more from the drop-down menu with all the full rules and requirement information there. So good luck to the winner, and thanks in advance for leaving me a rating or review. I can't wait to read it. I never thought about it that way, and one of the things that I learned through all my research before I tried doing, this high protein and tried doing zero carb was looking at the micronutrient density in protein, and it is so high. I remember when I took nutrition as my electives in university, it was one of the first things that we learned. The professor was saying the nutrients in animal proteins are so much more bioavailable and absorbable to us than they are from plant foods. And I was a hardcore vegetarian. I think I was going through my vegan phase then as well. And I was like, oh, darn, that's really disappointing to learn. But, as more of an omnivore now, I really have been finding it fascinating to learn more about that and how nutrient dense meat is. And it's really been fascinating. So I think that's really an interesting question to think about. Is it the protein or is it the micronutrients? And one of the reasons I wanted to test out this protocol for myself was, I watched a lot of Dr. Naiman's videos, and he really builds a convincing case for eating more protein and talking about especially all the protein, dilution that we've had, and talking about how we used to eat much higher levels of protein, and now it's sort of around 11%. And I think it was closer to maybe 30% previously. So I found that interesting.
Yeah,
and also he talked about how a lot of people snack or get
you go to like a
cravings,
fast food
especially in the
restaurant
evening,
and
because
you
they
order
haven't had their
2,500 calorie
protein needs
meal.
met
You would expect
during the
that
day. And I
eating
wonder
that
if that could also
2,500 calories,
be
you would
just
be full.
micronutrient
But basically, if you think
during the
about it
day.
in terms of what your cells are seeing, they're still not seeing any actual nutrient density. So beyond the carbohydrate and the sugar and the insulin effect of all that, your cells are still sitting there saying, look, I don't actually have what I need for energy production, which is really, at the end of the day, the goal of the body, of the cells, of the mitochondria, is just to produce energy so that we can live. And so if you don't have any nutrients, micronutrients, and when we talk about that, we're talking about a range of things. But if you don't have that in your food supply, And that's usually not found in things that are processed. So yeah, you're still going to be stoking kind of that fuel, that hunger. And so maybe later at night, you're going to be hungry. Obviously, also if insulin is high, normally will be because you're eating processed food and more carb-based food, that's also going to fuel the fire. And so these things kind of play together. I mean, we try to simplify nutrition into like catchphrases because that's all people can handle it these days. Obviously, it's much more complex than that. So I think it's obviously a combination of all those things. But definitely, I think protein is a huge component. In terms of kind of the ketogenic community, I think one of the issues that we are seeing is the push for a lot of these liquid oils as kind of the way to get the fuel and get your macros up. And a lot of those don't have those micronutrient density. And so you can get, high ratios in terms of fat, really push kind of the envelope in terms of that, and not necessarily lose weight or feel good or have energy or control your hunger. And a lot of that has to do with the micronutrient density as well of those products.
So would protein and micronutrient density, it seems like protein is the most essential of all the macronutrients because it has all those essential amino acids. And we're going to talk a little bit more about amino acids in this episode, but it seems like they're kind of one and the same if you're going for, biggest bang for your buck. That's the macronutrient that gives you the most nutrients.
But having said that, if you do very high ratios of protein to fat, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still in the keto camp where I do think that having good fat is extremely important in terms of a number of things beyond just insulin control, but also just as a building block in terms of cholesterol for all the hormones that you're needing to produce in your body, as well as the cellular membrane of all these cells. So I think that's one of the reasons that the carnivore is doing so well for so many people is because you essentially are not pushing the envelope in terms of the ratio of protein to fat. You're doing a 1-to-1 ratio. So you're getting essentially a ketogenic breakdown where it's about 70% fat and 30% protein by calories, right? And so within that, then you're getting obviously the amino acids that you need for a number of functions. And then you're getting the high quality fat in the form of the actual meat or, if you're doing eggs versus just having, liquid kind of types of oils, which may not be giving you as much in terms of the nutrient density, but also the kind of absorptions, meaning that those things will be absorbed a lot faster than if you have to chew a piece of meat and break it down in your stomach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And it kind of goes into, one thing I wanted to cover with you was when I did this trial, I wanted to really push my limits on protein consumption because I had seen Dr. Ted Naiman talk about fat and carb as really being our energy sources and protein not being energy. And I wanted to ask, you to maybe elaborate on that a little bit more, what your opinion is on that, because he talks about it more as replacement for our vital tissues, all of our, various proteins that we need in the bodies, which are precursors to hormones or precursors to so many things that we need. But he really talks about the energy that we get from food is from carb and from fat, and it's not from protein. And so we have this big debate about gluconeogenesis. And so I wanted to see for myself, what would happen if I tested my protein threshold, but this time did it 0 carbs so that I would take carbs out of the equation. And the entire time I did this 3-to-1 protein to fat, I was in ketosis and I wasn't really in a major caloric deficit because my BMR or my resting metabolic rate is closer to 1440, about 1600 when I'm being really active. So I wasn't in a huge caloric deficit, but I was in ketosis the entire time that I did it. And on multiple days, I was over 170, over 180 grams of protein, pretty much 0 to 1% carb. And the fat was kind of moderated, sometimes 50, 60, 70 grams a day. Why do you think I was able to generate a state of nutritional ketosis despite having such high levels of protein?
Yeah, great question. Well, a couple reasons, I think. So tell me again your caloric intake. How much was it? About 1,200 calories?
It was between like 1,250 up to 1,500. So most days I would say it's around 1,450.
Your BMR sounds pretty low. So I don't know if that's necessarily accurate per se, but correct me if I'm wrong. But during this experiment, you were doing some hiking. You were in Utah, right? I mean, you were in kind of some
Yeah.
national parks. Were you a little bit more active than your normal kind of day to day?
Oh, definitely. For about half of the experiment, I was doing really intense exercise, being outside in the day for 1 to 5 hours, doing, really intense activity, but, doing major protein loading,
Right.
170, 100 grams with the fat on it. And then the second half of it, I wasn't doing any of that strenuous
Okay.
activity, but I was still getting the same results.
And were you in pretty good ketosis starting off? I mean, I know you normally are, but were you pretty keto at that point?
I was, yeah, I was. I mean, I'm traveling, so it's always not as
Right.
good as when I'm just at home and, able to more control, what's in the food. But I was in ketosis when I started.
And the reason I ask is because for a couple of reasons. Number one, the question is, do you have a pretty significant glycogen storage? And probably not. So glycogen obviously being the storage in the muscles and the liver of glucose. And we all have it, even if you're, in a starvation mode. Like me, I'm on day 5 of a water fast. I'll still have some glycogen because you need glucose at all times to fuel your brain, but you'll probably have a minimal reserve at that degree. And so even if you are near your kind of TEE or total energy expenditure, you're probably still a little bit in a caloric deficit. So you will be burning some of your own fat stores and producing ketone bodies as a byproduct, even if you're pushing protein. Within protein, actually, protein also can be converted into ketone bodies to some degree. And so it's not as simple as saying only thing that causes ketone body production is fatty acids. You can still get some from protein. And then you can also get some from the fat that you're consuming within the protein. So I saw your meals, they looked amazing, but they're going to be a combination of protein and fat. And so you still are going to produce some ketone bodies from that degree. In terms of the question of are fat and carb just an energy source and is protein just more of a building block? Again, I think we have to try to simplify things, because if we start talking about the pathways, most people's eyes just kind of glaze over. But the protein does a lot of things. I mean, we talk about protein as it relates to kind of lean body mass and building muscle and, downing your protein shake after going to the gym. But it does a lot more than that. So protein is obviously going to help with muscle building, but it's also used for repair. So repair of tissue, skin, hair, eye function. It's also a signaling molecule for a lot of different processes, and it can be used for development of hormones as well. I wouldn't say that fat is just an energy source. I mean, as I mentioned, within fat, cholesterol is going to be used for essentially building the cell membranes that we need in order for the cells to be healthy. They're used for neuron generation. They're used for hormone production. They're used as signaling molecules. I mean, the research we're getting in ketone bodies at this point is unreal in terms of their function as signaling molecules in the body. So I think the more we learn, the better off we're going to understand kind of what the overall processes are and what their benefits are for each one. But yeah, I think you probably were in ketosis mostly from a caloric deficit, and still being in ketosis getting into the experiment.
I think you're probably right that partly was a little bit of a caloric deficit, but I wonder if any of it also has to do with how insulin sensitive I am from doing keto for all these years, from doing a lot of intermittent fasting. I have a really low fasting insulin and really low A1C. So I wonder if that's part of the reason why I'm able to tolerate such high levels of protein. That may not be the case for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a great point. So definitely insulin sensitivity plays a huge role. We talk about insulin production with protein, and, you can get somewhat of an insulin response from protein and definitely from certain amino acids. But, in regards to how insulin is surged with obviously glucose or just certain carbohydrates, it's not to the same degree. But if you are kind of metabolically sick, meaning that you have insulin resistance or just frank diabetes, your insulin response is going to be much higher with the same amount of protein intake. And so I think for you, since you are metabolically healthy, you don't have the same response as somebody else would.
Right, because I know that, for example, diabetics, they really have to watch their protein intake because it can raise blood glucose. In those cases, they really have to make sure to moderate it. But if you are, just a relatively healthy individual with no insulin resistance and you have high insulin sensitivity that, you may be able to increase your protein. And I'm curious what made you want to increase your protein intake.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are constantly learning about the body. I mean, even myself, Dr. Naiman, all the doctors out there, we're really kind of at the forefront in terms of discovering how the body works, especially when you're talking more about being fat adapted and using fat as your source of energy or your major source of energy. But in terms of protein, different amino acids are going to have different insulin responses. And so a lot of times things like whey protein. So I constantly see people doing a whey shake after a workout. Well, some of the amino acids in whey are going to actually give you the biggest insulin response. Same thing with dairy products. A lot of times people will have dairy as the major contributor of the fat content for being keto. And ironically, it's probably giving you more of an insulin response than you are desiring. So I think if you are metabolically sick, which a lot of people who are probably listening or thinking about going keto or low carb or some sort of kind of way of eating, you might need to be a little bit more in terms of the type of protein that you consume. But for me, being that I'm insulin sensitive and I'm not really looking to lose weight. I'm not really looking to be a huge bodybuilder either. I mean, I'm kind of at the point where I want to maintain my lean body mass, but I'm always open to doing experiments and seeing what the difference happens to my body. And I noticed that, yeah, when I did the 3-to-1 ratio protein to fat, I did put on a little bit of lean body mass, even though I was in a caloric deficit. And so I said, okay, well, maybe I need to push the protein a little bit more and see how my body responds. And I've noticed increased strength, increased lean body mass. And so I'm okay with it. I'm not stuck to one position, die hard, never going to change my mind. I mean, I think we have to be constantly open to learning and changing our opinion if we feel like we're wrong.
I feel the same way, and I have really noticed a big increase in my energy and my strength, and I notice more toning and more just lean mass. I have to do a body scan again to see exactly how much. It'll be interesting to see, how much lean mass I've gained. I know that I have from doing, carnivore, all this trial with zero carb and higher protein, but definitely just feeling more energized and more strength in my workouts too. So I know that you've been doing some other experiments. You did an egg fast recently, and have you done any other kind of things along this line of higher protein intake?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the body scan just because that's like music to my ears. I think you can't really understand what your body's going through unless you are really focusing on the lean body mass. And so doing a scan will give you that breakdown. So I think that's awesome. So I'm doing an experiment right now where I did 5 days of egg fast, which is pretty simple. You eat eggs and maybe some butter, and that's about it. And then I did a 1 day of refeeding to try to break out of ketosis. And then I did a 5 day water and electrolyte fast, and I'm finishing it today. And then I'm going to do 1 day of refeeding. And then I'm going to do a 5 day water, electrolyte, exogenous ketones, and MCT fast for 5 days.
When you posted about the egg fast, I think I said, you're finally doing carnivore.
Yeah, don't worry. After that, I'm going to take about 7 days to just eat normally, and then I'll do carnivore for about 21 days. So I'll have some more data. Yeah, you've convinced me multiple times, and so finally I'll do it. And I'm not anti-carnivore. I just I like variety of food, which is pretty ironic since I just did 5 days of eggs. But I like the taste of a variety of foods beyond just protein. But my goal with this experiment is not to lose weight, but to show how to get into ketosis quickly, but also what you can expect in terms of how you feel. And so I showed kind of fasting glucose, fasting ketones, breath ketones, HRV, sleep patterns with all of those, showing how you can really kind of get into ketosis pretty quickly with each one, but there's some challenges with each one. After 5 days of eggs, you pretty much never want to see an egg again. Doing it just water and electrolyte only. I mean, it can be a little bit painful, and I'm on a cruise while I'm doing it, so not too smart. And then the one with the exogenous ketones, MCT, I'll be doing it starting tomorrow, so I'll kind of discuss, some of the benefits, some of the drawbacks of taking that stuff, because I think there's a place for it. I just don't think it necessarily has to be something that you rely on all day, every day.
I like the idea of the egg fast because eggs are so incredibly nutritious in terms of the biological value of the protein in eggs is so high. And it does, I technically call it carnivore because it
Mhm.
is a kind of a carnivore diet, but it's a great way, I think, for people if they like eggs too, to just do something simple and easy and, get into ketosis. I'm sure you'll probably talk about more of those results on the podcast with Jimmy. So I don't want to ask you too much about that, but I'm curious how you're going to break your fast being on a cruise because I don't imagine you're going to be hitting the buffet.
No. And that's kind of, people are asking me, why are you doing a fast while you're on a cruise? Well, in a way, I have a big issue with the amount of vegetable oils that we find in basically all like restaurants at this point. If I were to make an argument, I would say that the amount of vegetable oil that we use, especially in the United States, is probably worse than the amount of sugar that we consume. And I know I'll probably get a lot of, hate mail for that, but those things are incredibly pro-inflammatory. Once they get incorporated into the cells, your cells cannot function properly. They incredibly destroy your mitochondrial function. And so when I'm on a cruise, like I took a picture today, there's a huge vat of canola oil and everything's cooked in it. And so for me, actually, it's actually in a way easier because I know that that stuff's going to be cooked in it. I don't feel well when I eat it. And so I figured, okay, well, I'll just fast. And then hopefully when I do eat, I'll try to make sure that they're using more butter as the way that they cook food. But it'll be less of a hassle in a way. But it's a great question in terms of when you're doing more of an extended fast, you could definitely have to start off slow. So what I did was I got some macadamia nuts, brought them on the cruise ship so that later this evening, what I'll do is I'll take a couple, 5, 6 macadamia nuts just to kind of get your body used to you're taking food again. And then I'll eat something probably pretty balanced. So some sort of meat, but not too much because you really can't eat that much at this point. And then some sort of kind of green carbohydrate, because in a way, the food that you take in after the fasting period is almost more important because that's basically the building blocks that you're going to use to rebuild your system. So you definitely want to focus on high quality ingredients. I'll do some ghee, some MCT just to kind of help give me the building blocks I need. And then after that, I'll try to make an omelet the next day. I get some hard-boiled eggs, which are hard to mess with. Keep it pretty simple, really. And you're not going to want to eat too much anyways, because it'll hurt your stomach.
Hey guys, just taking a really quick break to talk about the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. If you're interested in doing a ketogenic diet for yourself, it's a great place to start. I teach you everything about how to follow a keto diet to get yourself into nutritional ketosis, and it includes 28 days of meal plans. It comes with weekly shopping lists, how to interpret results, how to test yourself, a complete guide to getting started on keto. If you've been keto for a while and you're just not getting the results that you want to in terms of your health or fat loss, or you are brand new to keto, the 28-day challenge is a great option because it also comes with my free coaching and support in our members Facebook group. And you can post any questions that you have about the meal plans, about keto, and I am there supporting you. We have an amazing community in our group. I like to call it the happiest place on earth because everybody in there is so excited about following keto, about having found something that really works well for them. And everyone in there is just so kind, caring, generous, and supportive. And it's a really fun place to be and hang out. So if you'd like more info on it, you can find it at ketogenicgirl.com. And it's the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. And now back to our interview. It's so funny you said that because I thought if I was on a cruise, I'd probably just get hard-boiled eggs because, fried in vegetable oil or anything, they're just going to be boiled in water and probably be the simplest thing,
Yes.
As opposed to fried or, scrambled eggs or anything. But I think it's a couple of great points that you make, the first being how much vegetable oil is used when eating out. And I think that's so important for people to be mindful of because, a lot of research has shown that people are eating out more than ever. We all are eating out more than ever because of busy lifestyles. And, most restaurant food, I think, is cooked in vegetable oils. And so you're going to be getting a big imbalance of, the omega-6 fatty acids there. And it's really important for people to be mindful of that if they're eating out a lot. And the other point of, once you've gone through the fast, you've gone through this autophagy and mitophagy, and you want to get the most benefits out of that fast and out of all those processes of breaking down and getting rid of those, cells in the mitochondria and rebuilding the new ones, you want to have the best possible food quality to do that with. So
Exactly.
that's a really good point. Now, going back to amino acids. So we know there's about 20 amino acids, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but didn't really delve into the different types. So I know that there's a lot of curiosity on, are there some amino acids that are better for you than others? Or there's some that are worse for you? And, are there certain foods that contain more of the better ones? I know you mentioned that whey protein might not have the best mix.
Well, there are 20 amino acids, and really of those, there's 9 essential amino acids, meaning that you have to take them in or else you're not going to be able to do certain functions. And so those 9 amino acids are histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. And if you just had a headache from that, I don't blame you. We had to memorize those. And so those are ones that you only get from certain foods. And so if you are vegan, vegetarian, you can get those amino acids, but it's very hard. You have to supplement quite a bit. And that's one of the reasons that I think there is a detriment from being, especially vegan. I mean, if you're vegetarian and you can do some eggs, then you'll get most of those amino acids. But each amino acid basically plays a role. Obviously, some are used for muscle building, and obviously we think of proteins in that regards. And some of those, like leucine, valine, lysine, isoleucine, those are going to be important in terms of building muscle. There are a group called branched chain amino acids, and that's really 3 of those amino acids, which is leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And about 35% of the amino acids in our muscles are going to be those kind. And so some people who are bodybuilders will take those as supplements. Well, if you're just eating real whole food, you should be able to get the maximal amount of BCAAs that you need. The other question, though, really becomes, what other functions do they play a role in? And as I mentioned, they're used as building blocks for hormone production, also are converted into neurotransmitters. So a lot of the serotonin, dopamine production is going to be based on having those amino acids available. So a lot of times you might see elevated levels of depression and anxiety, and that could be dietary related beyond just kind of this leaky gut syndrome that we talk about. But it could be from a deficit of protein intake. And so that's, something to really keep in mind. In terms of sources, that's why I think one of the reasons keto is so effective, and also paleo, is that you're really focusing on real whole foods. So you're talking about real protein, good sources of protein. We obviously recommend, organic, grass-fed, pan massage meat as well as we can. But even if you can't afford that, just eating ground beef and eggs from Walmart, that's probably going to give you enough of those amino acids that you need in order to do all the functions in the body. One thing on omega-6s I just want to talk about, because there is this question. So omega-6s in and of themselves are not bad for you. Omega-6s are extremely important. They are the inflammatory, basically, cascade, but you need them in order to kind of create a defense mechanism against infections. The issue is that we think you should have about a 2-to-1 ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. The average American Western diet will be getting about 20 to 30 to 1 ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. And so it's really this imbalance of the two that is the issue and causing a lot of pro-inflammatory cascades, which leads to systemic inflammation, which leads to a whole host of problems. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer to your question.
Right. And I've even seen research on 1-to-1 ratio, of omega-3 to omega-6. So, the 20-to-1 or the 30-to-1 is a far cry from that.
Absolutely. But that's pretty common, unfortunately, because when we talk about the vegetable oils being in everything, if you're eating fast food, if you're eating at kind of restaurants that are made mostly like to-go food, those are going to be predominantly based in vegetable oils. And unfortunately, we've labeled them as heart healthy. So now there's kind of a carte blanche in the sense that they can use them. Well, they're heart healthy. Well, yeah, no, they're not so much. You're talking about highly processed ingredients that are very pro-inflammatory at high levels. But here's the kind of crazy thing. Even like Michelin star rated restaurants are using vegetable oils as their go-to oil, or they're using a blend of that plus like olive oil. So there's a lot of issues with regards to that. So hopefully we'll get that out of our food system, but I think it's going to take a while.
And do you think that any protein sources are better than others?
Yeah, I mean, I would say initially the type that you like and that you'll eat is probably better. I would say beyond type, I would focus on quality. So in general, you're going to have a balance of amino acids, whether it's from beef or chicken or turkey or fish. My question really with a lot of the food that we have in our system is what's the source? So for instance, if you're eating wild caught salmon versus farmed raised salmon, you're going to get completely different types of ingredients from it, building blocks. The type of fat that you're going to consume, if you eat wild caught fish, it's going to have much higher levels of omega-3. If you're eating farmed, it's going to be predominantly omega-6. It's going to be unhealthy. It may have antibiotics in it. It may have been given growth hormones. And so you're really not getting what they say you're getting. Same thing with beef. There's a big issue with the carnivore and the kind of vegetarian groups going back and forth in terms of the humanity aspect of eating meat. Well, I think both sides would agree that eating meat from a commercialized kind of process area where these animals are really unethically treated, nobody agrees with that versus catching something or having a farmer who is really kind of focused on raising healthy animals and then obviously using them as food source. I think I'm okay with that. And so I think focusing on the kind of type of ingredients or the type of protein that you're eating is really kind of the way to go.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And I think that you can't really go wrong if you're focusing on getting the highest quality possible. And, the whole reason behind getting grass-fed and grass-finished beef is to get more of a balance of those omega-3s, and the same with, the wild-caught salmon and stuff. So there is a reason why, food quality is important. But I love how you brought up just eggs and ground beef from Walmart, because that is an incredibly nutritious meal, in terms of meeting a lot of the body's requirements, even if it's not the highest quality. It's somewhere that anyone can start and anyone on any budget can start with, and then maybe they can, work on getting higher quality proteins at a later date. But if all else fails, if you're getting ground beef and you're cooking eggs, you're going to have, really nutrient dense food there, even if it may not be, the grass-fed and wild-caught, everything that, pasture-raised eggs
Right.
that we talk about and we try to aim for. And I certainly don't eat that way every day. I travel all the time. I do eat at restaurants. When I'm there, I try to choose things that are going to be maybe less fried in those kinds of oils and things, but it's inevitable. It's just going to be a part of life and eating out sometimes. But that's why it's important to make those efforts when you're at home or you're not traveling. So one thing I want to touch on is talking about antioxidants. And there's so much emphasis, put on having a lot of antioxidants in the diet. And I think that's why a lot of times fruit is emphasized as well. And we talk about this, and I think you talked about it. Also, I was watching one of the videos from the cruise about reactive oxygen species. And so I'm curious about the process of oxidation in our cells and maybe why on a keto diet there is less of a requirement for antioxidants.
Yeah, great question. So think of reactive oxygen species, and I'm just going to call them ROS going forward because it's easier, not so much of a tongue-tying statement. But ROS is basically like rust inside the body. And so, if you put steel out over time, it's going to rust, and that's basically aging of the metal. Same thing happens inside our body. Now, having said that, we need these things. They're very, very important, and they are byproducts of energy metabolism. And so normally what our body will do is it'll use these things in order to fight off infections. So viruses, bacteria, cancerous cells. And basically you have Pac-Man who go around your system, spit these things out, and it kills these dangerous foreign bodies. So you need them. And the question then becomes, how many do you need? Now, if you have excessive amounts, that really drives a couple things. It drives increased overall inflammation. It increases aging or speeds it up. And you can measure this by measuring something called telomeres. But in order to kind of dampen this down, well, going keto tremendously helps, because here's what happens when you're going ketogenic. For instance, I compare it to burning diesel fuel versus gasoline. You are much more efficient. You're making less of these ROS species, and so you're having less chronic inflammation. Then when you add in some kind of biohacks that I described, like photobiomodulation, you're actually affecting the mitochondria so that you're breaking up some of the bonds that these ROSs are having, and you're allowing for energy to basically be produced much more efficiently. And at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, we use food because it makes us feel good, because it fuels us. But at the end of the day, what we really are using those energy sources for is to make ATP, because you need that in order to do all the processes in your body. When you're keto, obviously you're decreasing insulin, you're decreasing some of the other hormones in terms of, decreased gremlin and kind of controlling leptin, but you're also really allowing for much more efficient burning of energy, because you make less of these when you're burning ketone bodies versus glucose, basically. And it all goes down into something that you're probably going to learn soon in your studies, the TCA cycle. Where the actual parts are coming into that TCA cycle determines how much of ATP is being generated and how many byproducts are being generated. When you're doing keto, it's really giving you more of the acetyl-CoA, which gives you less reactive oxygen species, but more ATP. So short answer, more energy with less crap. And so you're less inflamed, you're doing less damage to your body, you're not aging as quickly. And so then the other issue too that happens with antioxidants is your major antioxidant in your body. I mean, there's many, but one of the major ones is glutathione. And glutathione is very hard to increase. You can increase it significantly by fasting. So if you do extended fastings, you increase it. But also when you're keto, you're going to be needing less of it in order to kind of fend off some of these oxidant species that are being produced. So I would say if you focus on eating real food versus taking antioxidants, which is kind of suppressing the symptoms instead of going to the root cause, you'd be a lot better off and you'd save a ton of money, because those things tend to be pretty expensive.
Right. And then, all this emphasis that's put on eating fruit because of the antioxidants is kind of, negated by just being on a keto diet in general.
Right. And I mean, I'm not anti-fruit. I think that, depending on your situation, I personally don't eat fruit. I will eat berries seasonally. So if I'm up in the Pacific Northwest and it's berry season, I will do pretty well in terms of eating berries. But I think the issue just becomes this idea of globalism, where you have access to fruit all the time. It used to be that,
Right.
If it was seasonally, if you were kind of somewhere away from the equator and you had access to fruit, it was for a certain period of time, and then you go the rest of the year without fruit, and that's okay. It's just we have turned a normal mechanism, which is our body's ability to store energy as fat, and we just have not turned that switch off. And so having access to whatever you want at all periods of time, while it's amazing, it's also extremely detrimental to health, because if you can't shut it off, and it's not a question of willpower, it's just a question of metabolism, then you're going to have all the metabolic diseases that people are experiencing.
Yeah, and I think I did a post yesterday that whenever I do a post about fruit, I always expect a lot of backlash, because I find people are really attached to fruit in general, because we're always sold fruit and vegetables as one package. And, we think of it as such a healthy food, but also, there's a lot of emotional attachment, I think, to fruit too, just like a lot of happy memories. It's a comfort food. But I did this post just about a banana, and it was a repost of an infographic that Martina Johansson, who's an author.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And biohacking. Yeah, she is. And she's also an author with Victory Belt, and she does some great work. And I really like her emphasis on the biochemistry aspect of doing keto. But one of the reasons I posted it is there are studies that show that switch to go into nutritional ketosis, it doesn't happen unless you get to that 20, below 30, for some people below 20 gram of carb intake per day. And that's when you go into that fat burning mode of accessing your stored fat. And so if one banana, for example, contains 27 grams of carb, that one banana could prevent someone from going into nutritional ketosis. And then I've also seen incredible work done. I know I'm going to mispronounce her name, Dr. John Limansky. I'm not sure if it's Lehman or Leman. I always get it wrong, but she's done some incredible work showing the recovery, I think, of rodents on a low carb diet combined with radiation therapy for cancer treatment. And the recovery rates went from, I think, 0 to 75%. She has this in one of her videos from low carb Breckenridge. And that was the difference of one banana. So I like to talk about, the difference that fruit can make if you are insulin resistant, if you're doing keto, to reverse insulin resistance, to prevent metabolic syndrome, or, disease, that fruit can have a big impact. And sometimes fruit can have as much sugar as a candy bar or, a soft drink. And so there's, that's why fruit is restricted on a ketogenic diet. And it's not because fruit doesn't have great nutrients in it, but there's a valid reason for that moderation, or a lot of moderation that needs to be there.
Yeah. And so that's a great point. What I would say is a couple things with fruit in general. You're talking about sugar, but we can break it down into fructose versus glucose, and they are processed extremely different by the body. So when you're talking about vegetables, you're talking about mostly glucose based. Some, if they're very starchy, may have some fructose, but in general, you're talking about glucose, and that is basically taken up by the cells, used as energy, and the rest gets stored as fat. But fructose plays a very different role, and fructose will get shuttled to the liver preferentially. And in the liver, it's going to be converted into something that basically is eventually converted into triglycerides. The byproduct of that is you get fatty liver disease. And once you start getting fatty liver disease, eventually the liver can't store all those triglycerides in the liver. And so it gets shuttled out into the fat tissue. So you put on more fat. But part of the issue is that once you have insulin resistance, there's different sources of insulin resistance. So we talk about it, but it means more than just kind of peripheral. You can have insulin resistance at your liver. You can have it in your pancreas. You can have it in your muscles. And so if you have insulin resistance in your liver, it's generally derived from fructose-based foods like fruit. And so if you're going out and eating like an apple a week, yeah, that's probably not going to induce, fatty liver disease. But unfortunately, fructose and high fructose corn syrup, which is basically just a higher concentration of fructose, is in everything that we eat. It's in your bread, it's in your pasta, it's in your tomato sauce, it's in, you name it, ketchup, even mustard. I mean, I'll see it in all kinds of foods where you wouldn't expect it. And so we've kind of been adapted to eating high levels of sugar. I mean, I think people now are kind of used to that sweet taste. And so if it doesn't taste like that, it doesn't taste good. So in general, when you're kind of insulin resistant or you have some metabolic diseases, yeah, you need to avoid fruit initially, probably going forward, unless you do it once in a while. But then the question is, how much is once in a while? So you can get those nutrients from other food sources and not necessarily just need fruit in order to have it done.
I like how you do it with your kids. And I think you posted about how like fresh mango is a treat for them as opposed to giving them, chocolate or candy or ice cream or something.
Exactly. We are very aware of how we feed our children, but on the flip side, I don't think it's necessary for them to be doing fasting and being hardcore keto. They eat real food.
Right.
They eat low carb, high fat. They eat balanced meals. But yeah, instead of going out and eating, huge ice cream sundae, they'll eat mango. And it's okay because these kids are burning energy like crazy. But what I see, and especially now on the cruise, and yeah, it's people are on vacation, but I don't think it really changes much from a lot of what people eat. Kids are eating, chocolate cake, like 4 or 5 desserts, and that's a daily thing. You're getting massive amounts of calories from sugar. And so you might not see it outwardly in terms of their body composition. They might not be obese, but you will see it internally, meaning they're probably having starting of prediabetes, insulin resistance, fatty liver disease. And why would you want to do that when you can kind of prevent them from having all the issues that I see as a physician down the road? So that's kind of our perspective for what it's worth.
I can only imagine that being raised the way that you guys are raising your kids, that you may not have to do all these other interventions and biohacks and things later because, you've already been raised on whole foods. And so you don't have all this stuff to unravel later in life that, a lot of us are using these biohacks and things to optimize our health now because we were on high carb, low fat diets for a long time and eating processed food, eating sugar and stuff. So you're really setting them up to maybe not have to do all those things that you mentioned even later in life. So I think that's great. Now I just want to touch on one last thing before we wrap today. And I want to talk about calorie deficits. Now, for your clients that you work with who are looking to burn fat, where do you find balance between the, calories in versus calories out, the energy balance equation of fat loss, and creating fat loss without slowing the metabolism with a caloric reduction?
Yeah, great point. So I talked about calories the other day, and I had a lot of people yell at me about it, which I thought was pretty funny. because they said all that matters is insulin. Well, yes and no. So calories still do matter. It's not as simple as calories in equals calories out. I think that premise has done a tremendous amount of damage to us as a society because that's what people focus on. So it's not as simple as just calories in equals calories out. The type of calories you consume do matter. But the point I was trying to make was that if you do not know what your BMR or your TEE, which is your total energy expenditure, really kind of how many calories you burn per day, then you don't really know a good base from where to start off with. And so if you are, let's say, for easy math, your TEE is 2,000 calories per day, and you're consuming more than that. In general, even if it's balanced, you are likely going to be either maintaining your weight or maybe putting on a little bit. But the flip side of that is if you go too stringent, meaning that you drop your caloric intake to less than 1,200 calories, for some people it's less than 800 calories, you're going to slow your metabolism down at that point. The sweet spot really is kind of in the middle. So if you know that your TE is about 2,000 calories and you're consuming about 1,800 calories and it's balanced, meaning it's more of a ketogenic, low carb, you're trying to reduce your insulin so that you are able to access your fat stores for energy, then you're going to lose weight. One of the easiest ways, and the way that I do it with most of my clients, is I get them started on a ketogenic. And most of the people, I would say 50% of the people I work with are metabolically sick. The other 50 are not so much, but they want to lose weight or they want the cognitive benefits. They're high kind of performance individuals, CEOs, entrepreneurs who want to just feel better. So I start them off ketogenic. I'm not so worried about the caloric intake, just getting them ready in terms of eating real food, how they feel. And then I start incorporating intermittent fasting. Because if you look at kind of how the body works, the body doesn't really care where the energy is coming from. If it's coming from you or if it's coming from an outside source, it's going to use whatever it has available. So if you are constantly eating, that energy is going to be used for energy production and you're not going to access your fat stores, even if it's 100% fat. So a lot of people are saying, well, I eat fat to feel satiated, and that's okay. And that's true. But if you're eating, 5,000 calories of fat, you're not going to lose weight if that's your goal. And so if you are able to incorporate some intermittent fasting, like 16-8 window, where you're not eating for 16 hours and you're eating for 8 hours, then during those periods of 16 hours, you're going to be accessing your body fat stores for energy and you'll start losing weight. And you'll find that you can condense the caloric intake into an 8-hour window and still lose weight. And so it's really a question of kind of timing when you're eating and then what type of calories you're consuming as well.
So someone can potentially be losing fat or burning fat just from doing the intermittent fasting throughout the day between meals and then, from their last meal to the next meal the next day. But at the same time, during that eating window, they need to make sure that there is somewhat of a caloric deficit.
Yeah, so exactly. So Sachin Panda actually looked at this. He's a researcher out of Salk Institute in San Diego. And they took two groups where one group ate same calories. So ate the same calories. One group ate as much as they wanted in terms of timing. The other one restricted to 8 hours. And even with the same calories, the one who ate in an 8-hour window lost about 20% more in terms of fat. And the reason really we think is because there is a circadian rhythm to all this. So each organ kind of has its own circadian rhythm, with the pancreas also having a circadian rhythm impacting whether or not you're sleeping. When you restrict your intake to certain hours of the day and a shorter window, you are allowing your body to burn fat during those other periods, assuming that you've kind of burned through your glycogen store, but you're allowing your body to access those other fat stores. Versus if you're eating all the time, even if it's keto, you may not be losing weight because you're essentially using the energy that you're eating, right? And so it's not as simple as calories, don't matter or they're the only thing that matter. It's really this combination of the types of calories, the timing of calories, and then how many calories.
Yeah, I would agree that it really is a combination of the hormonal factors and the energy balance as well. And hormonal factors maybe being a little more important in terms of which macronutrients you're eating and how fasting can lower insulin over time. And it also can lower your glycogen stores so you can get into that fat burning mode. And it really seems to be not one or the other, but a combination of both of those theories together that makes for that fat burning to occur. And
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
what does it mean that each organ in our body has its own circadian rhythm? I know Dr. Panda has done some great work on this and just released a book on it as well. And I'm curious, what it means that each organ has its own circadian rhythm.
Yeah, if you think in terms of kind of what our normal ancestral circadian rhythm was, right? So wake up when the sun rises, we do our activities throughout the day. When the sun goes down, we're supposed to be asleep. Within that, your body basically, let's take the kind of GI system, for instance, because that's a big one of research. Your GI system is going to want to work certain periods of the day. It's not going to want to work at midnight or 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. It's going to want to do its functions depending on where you live in terms of latitude. If you're up really high north, it's going to want to do its functions earlier on in the day. And so if you are eating late at night, for instance, you might be suppressing melatonin production from your pancreas, and so you won't sleep very well. And when you don't sleep very well, the next day you are going to have much higher levels of cortisol. And when you have much higher levels of cortisol, that's going to also stoke insulin, and it's going to stoke your desire to eat carbohydrates. And so you get kind of in this vicious cycle where you don't sleep well, so you're hungry, so you don't eat well. So then the next day you don't sleep well, and you kind of go down this path and maybe try to self-medicate to get back into a sleeping pattern. Well, simple solution would be maybe not eating super late at night, maybe eating, at 6 o'clock at night, 5 o'clock at night. Same thing goes with other organs. The major ones are really going to be your GI system, your pancreas, your liver, your spleen. Those are going to have kind of their own kind of goals in terms of when they're functioning optimally.
That's really, really interesting. And there's so much that we're learning about our bodies all the time. It's so fascinating to me, and also about, some of the great research and work being done by, various institutes like the Salk Institute has so much great information coming out of it all the time. So I love following their work as well. And thank you so much for providing some insight on that with us today, and being back on the show. It was a pleasure having you here. And thanks so much for sharing your time with us and answering all of the questions that I had for you today on amino acids and protein. And we had some great discussion there.
Vanessa, it's always a pleasure talking with you. So pleasure was mine.
Great. Thanks so much, John.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Fast Keto today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please head over to iTunes and leave me a rating or review. I would absolutely love to read it, and it also will enter you into the contest draw giveaway that I am doing this month for the month of September on receiving a free meal plan from my Build Your Day collection. I would love to send it to one lucky winner, and you can be entered into the giveaway by leaving me a rating or review on iTunes. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Dr. John Limansky. He is such a wealth of information on keto, being a physician and someone who practices keto for himself and has for many years. So it is always fascinating getting to have John on the show with us. Until next week's episode, I hope you have a fat-fueled week. And if you are interested in learning more about the 20-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge, you can go to ketogenicgirl.com, and feel free to send me an email or any messages or questions over at the Facebook page, which is The Ketogenic Girl on Facebook. I'm always over there coaching and supporting our members and answering questions about the program. So it's the best way to reach me. If you have any questions about the 28-day challenge, feel free to hit me up over there. So hope you have a fat-fueled rest of your day and week, and catch you on the next episode.